Dow has been surging, now within striking distance of a huge milestone. Huge. So is this a sign of more good times to come? CNN's Allison Kosick live at the New York Stock Exchange. Hi, Allison.
Hi, Carol. So much for the predictions. Analyst after analyst predicted the Dow would drop 1,000 points if Donald Trump won the election. Well, the exact opposite is happening. The Dow is up more than 1,200 points, or 7% since the election. It's now sitting less than 500 points away from 20,000. And some optimistic traders are telling me they think it will get to that milestone in just a few weeks. Almost 300 of those points came in yesterday, with the Dow closing at a record high. The S&P also hit a record high. The Nasdaq is getting close to a record. Investors are all giddy because they believe Trump will be good for business and the economy. They're banking on him to usher in low regulation, low taxes, faster growth, and fiscal stimulus. And with the Republican Congress and White House, Carol, the thinking is an infrastructure program can be passed. Carol?
All right, Allison Kosick reporting live from the New York Stock Exchange. Thanks. And good morning, I'm Carol Costello. Thanks so much for joining me. Illegal and unconstitutional. That's how Donald Trump has described an Obama program that allows young people brought here illegally by their parents to go to college and to get a job if they register with the government. You might know these people as dreamers, kids who desperately want American citizenship one day. In an interview with Time magazine, Mr. Trump now says his administration will, quote, work something out for dreamers. Helping Trump with his immigration plans? Maybe retired General John Kelly. He's the man Trump has tapped to lead the Department of Homeland Security. Kelly, who served 40 years in the Marines, is known for his strict views on the nation's southern border. Joining me now to talk about this is Jenna Napolitano, former Secretary of Homeland Security. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for being with me this morning. Do you believe Mr. Trump will work something out for dreamers?
You know, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, DACA, was a policy that was instituted when I was secretary. It's a very particular policy. It's designed specifically for young people who were brought here as children, raised here as children, done everything we've asked of them. We have several thousand of them at the University of California, where I now serve as president. They are undocumented, true, but they're the kind of talent and brains that we want to have remain in our country. So something definitely needs to be worked out.
There are some Republicans, though, who say that Mr. Trump really has to restore law and order in this country, and these kids, along with their parents, broke the law. So why shouldn't they be sent back?
Well, he's also talked about prioritizing the deportation of violent felons and gang members, essentially the same priorities that we had under the Obama administration. The dreamers, under any rational analysis of priorities, would be at the very bottom of any kind of deportation program. So, with his announced policy where he wants to go, which with what good law enforcement would be, the dreamers should be allowed to remain in this country. DACA was a very specifically designed program for them, and it's worked very well.
So if Mr. Trump does not work something out, as he has intimated, you say you'll protect and defend students who are in the country illegally and tell campus police in California to do the same. What exactly does that mean?
Well, what it means for us is that we will not convert campus police into adjunct immigration officers. We won't voluntarily turn over student records, where we'll protect their privacy. And we will work to provide them legal representation should they find themselves in an actual deportation proceeding. We know that if you have a lawyer, you do much better in a deportation proceeding than if you don't.
So won't you be breaking the law if you don't cooperate with federal authorities?
No. There's no law that says you must cooperate with federal authorities. And indeed, it is done consensually between law enforcement departments. But many law enforcement departments around the country are now saying, look, we are not here to be ICE agents. We are here to focus on, in our case, safety on our campuses. And to be adjunct immigration officers would be contrary to that primary mission.
I just want to go back to that. So if I don't cooperate with federal authorities, that's okay?
There's no law that requires a police department to do so. That was your question. And again, with DACA kids, let's talk about who this subject is about. These are young people brought here as children. They've been raised here. They've done well enough in school to get admitted to the University of California. That's not the easiest thing in the world to do. They have had a criminal history check. They've had a background check to be in DACA. These are not the kind of crime and security risks that one should focus on in any kind of immigration regime.
But as a formal federal authority, because you were the Secretary of Homeland Security, if you were in the Trump administration, and the Trump administration is trying to, get to these undocumented people, wouldn't it frustrate you to have university officials not cooperate with federal authorities when they're just trying to do their jobs?
No, I disagree. My point is that if you take the announced priority, you can't deport everybody that's in the country in an undocumented status. That's a fact. So you have to prioritize. And the priorities ought to be those who have committed serious felonies, those who are gang members, those who are security risks. I will tell you, by the time you do those priorities, you're just about done. Excuse me?
But isn't it up to the Trump administration now to set priorities?
And it would be the wrong priority to focus on dreamers, and not the right priority in terms of something that's a law enforcement regime that makes sense in the immigration context.
I want to switch topics for just a second. Democrats, they're worried that Mr. Trump has picked so many generals. He's picked a general to serve as Secretary of Defense, National Security Advisor, Department of Homeland Security, and maybe even Secretary of State. Does that concern you?
Not necessarily, and I think the putative nominee for Department of Homeland Security, General Kelly, I think you need somebody that could do multiple things at the same time, because the Department of Homeland Security has such broad-ranging powers and authorities. You've got to be able to do counterterrorism. You've got to be able to run the TSA. You've got to be able to do immigration. You've got to be able to do cybersecurity. All these things happen all at the same time. So what you want is a leader who can organize, prioritize, and multitask.
Some, though, say a militarized view of America got us into, the Iraq War. It created problems at Abu Ghraib. It created the mess that is now Guantanamo Bay. So, do they have a point?
They may in the abstract. I think the key question is, how do these generals operate when, for example, General Kelly will be in a civilian context? This is not the Pentagon.
Speaking of General Kelly, then, he's tough on border security. This is what he said last year about that.
If a terrorist or almost anyone wants to get into our country, they just pay the fare. No one checks their passports. No one, they don't go through metal detectors. No one cares why they're coming. They just ride this network.
So you were the governor of Arizona. You were Homeland Security Secretary. Is General Kelly right?
I know that border very, very well, and I think one of the first things General Kelly will need to do is actually get down to the southwest border and see all the layers of protection that have been installed over the last 8 years. It's fencing and walling in some places, it's aerial coverage, it's increased border patrol presence, it's checkpoints along different routes that come into the United States. So the southwest border, in fact, has had negative immigration over the last few years, meaning more have left than have come. The bigger issue, I suspect, and that General Kelly will have to deal with, are the visa overstays. Those who actually have a visa, they come into the country and they overstay their visa.
Do you think that Donald Trump will build his wall?
I hope that was campaign rhetoric. As someone who was a border state governor and who knows that, I've ridden it on horseback, I've driven it in a vehicle, I've flown it. Building a wall for those thousands of miles is not an effective use of our resources.
Would it keep the unwanted people out, like the people that General Kelly was talking about?
No, not at all. First of all, it doesn't deal with the visa overstay problem that I referenced. And second, my experience with fences and walls is, you build as I used to say as governor, build a 10-foot wall and I'll show you a 12-foot ladder. I mean, people go over, people come under. You have to have multiple layers at that border to increase your likelihood of finding somebody.
Former Homeland Secretary Janet Napolitano, thank you so much for joining me this morning. I do appreciate it.
Thank you.